On a warm June morning in 2013, 47-year-old long-haul trucker Dale Mercer pulled his red Kenworth out of the Redline Freight Depot outside Shreveport for what should have been the simplest run of his month. A single drop-off. A familiar route. 4 hours of quiet highway, then home before dusk. But somewhere between the depot gate and the first checkpoint, Dale disappeared, silently, cleanly, and without a trace. His dispatcher said his radio went dead within 30 minutes. His GPS quit an hour later. And by the time he missed his scheduled warehouse arrival, the uneasy feeling in the logistics office had hardened into dread. Truckers don't just vanish on that route. There are no blind turns, no steep ravines, no abandoned stretches of road where a 40-foot rig could hide. For 10 years, investigators chased rumors, false sightings, and dead-end witness statements. Dale's family lived in a decade-long limbo. No remains, no wreckage, no answers. Until the summer of 2023, when a dive team surveying an eroded riverbank along the Ouachita made a discovery that would crack the case open. Beneath 15 feet of silty water sat a trailer, Dale's trailer, frozen in time, and holding a truth darker than anyone expected. Dale Mercer lived with a clock in his bloodstream. His daughter, Raylan, used to joke that he could predict time better than her phone. He woke at the same hour, left on the same routes, refueled at the same places, and always called home at exactly 7:30 p.m. on nights he was away. For truckers, predictability is a lifeline. It keeps you grounded when the world blurs into asphalt and white lines. For Dale, predictability wasn't just comfort, it was discipline, shaped by 20 years spent hauling freight across the South. His co-workers at Redline respected him. He wasn't loud, but he was present. He trained new drivers, volunteered for holiday shifts, and never once had an accident or a late delivery. If every driver ran like Dale, we'd never have a backlog, his supervisor once said. He was the kind of man who never cut corners. That's why his disappearance hit people harder than it should have. It was like hearing that a lighthouse had suddenly walked off its cliff. On June 4th, he'd been assigned Route 7B, a straight shot to a Monroe warehouse. He'd driven it hundreds of times. There were no major detours, no alternate paths worth taking, no shortcuts. The whole thing was so routine that Dale didn't even pack an overnight bag. He planned to return home for dinner with Raylan and a quick stop at the hospice to see his mother. At 6:42 a.m., he rolled out of the depot. At 7:15, he passed the first-way station. Everything was normal. But at 7:38, radio logs show his last transmission. Redline 43 to dispatch. Little static on this end, switching channels. He never switched channels. Minutes later, his digital GPS tracker sent its final ping from a rural stretch outside Swartz, still on his route, but far from anything dangerous. After that, nothing. No brake sensor data, no ignition logs, no driver assist activity. Just silence. By noon, the warehouse called Redline to report a no-show. At 1:20, dispatch reached out to Dale's wife and daughter. By 4 p.m., state police were sweeping the highways. Search helicopters flew grid paths along the entire route. Officers checked rest stops, way stations, gas stations, and the small diners truckers often used. Nothing. Eyewitness tips poured in over the next week, drivers claiming they'd seen a red Kenworth parked at odd spots, but every lead dissolved under scrutiny. Dale's rig had vanished. His trailer had vanished. Dale himself had simply evaporated between two cities that had never swallowed a truck whole. In those early days, investigators believed one thing above all. A man like Dale doesn't stray unless someone, or something, forces him to. From the beginning, search teams suspected the river. The Ouachita runs parallel to parts of Route 7B, cutting through pockets of dense cypress and muddy banks. If a tractor-trailer somehow veered off the road, mechanical failure, medical emergency, a sudden swerve, its weight could drag it into the water. But that theory fell apart almost as fast as it surfaced. The riverbanks nearest the highway were shallow. A rig plunging off the road would leave massive skid marks, broken branches, and a gash in the earth so obvious even an amateur searcher would spot it. But patrol after patrol found nothing. No tracks, no debris, no torn foliage. The only tire marks belonged to the deputies doing the search. Divers were called in during the first 72 hours, focusing on the deeper pools and eddies where silt could potentially bury a vehicle. Side-scan sonar swept miles of riverbed. Nothing unusual appeared, just sandbars, fallen logs, and river trash. After a week of scans, the river was cleared. If the truck had gone in, searchers insisted, they would have found it. So investigators shifted focus to the roads. Maybe Dale had taken a detour to avoid construction. But there was none that day. Maybe he'd been forced off the route by someone. But no signs of pursuit appeared on the highway cameras. Maybe the rig had been stolen for parts, but a stolen semi doesn't disappear completely. Rumors began to spread among the trucking community. Some whispered about hijackers who forced drivers into remote woods. Others talked about organized thieves who exported stolen rigs piece by piece. A few mentioned something more sinister: drivers who claimed to see strange vehicles tailing them late at night, headlights that appeared and disappeared behind blind curves, and radios that crackled with voices no CB channel should carry. Most brushed it off. But not Dale's daughter. Raylan spent months digging through forums, old case files, and similar disappearances across the South. She discovered unsettling parallels: truckers who vanished on clear roads, during daylight, without signs of struggle. Their rigs were never recovered. Their trailers were never tracked. Families were left with the same unanswered questions she now carried. But none of those older cases prepared her for what came next. 10 years passed with nothing but heartache. Dale's empty chair at birthdays. His untouched tools in the garage. His boots still by the back door. Then, in May 2023, the river shifted. Heavy storms slammed into northern Louisiana, raising water levels and pulling at softer banks. Erosion chewed away at a secluded bend of the Ouachita miles off Dale's assigned route. A previously shallow area collapsed into a 15-foot drop, deep enough to swallow more than just Riverbank. A week later, a wildlife survey team sent drones over the new drop-off. One drone captured something metallic beneath the surface, too large to be a car, too rectangular to be scrap. Authorities were notified. Divers returned to the river they'd long dismissed. This time, the river was ready to confess. 3 divers descended into the murky pool. Visibility was barely 2 feet, the water thick with churned-up clay. They fanned out, sweeping with gloved hands. Within minutes, one diver's fingertips brushed a flat metal panel. He followed its line downward, then sideways, then up again. A rectangle. A wall. A trailer wall. He surfaced with a single sentence. "We found it." Reporters weren't told yet. The site was remote, accessible only by a rough ATV trail. Investigators cordoned off the shoreline and brought in a crane rig capable of lifting up to 50,000 pounds. Over the next 8 hours, divers rigged straps beneath the sunken trailer. When the crane lifted, the river fought back, clinging to the metal with thick layers of mud. But inch by inch, the shape rose from the water, long, boxy, unmistakably a refrigerated trailer. And on the rear doors, barely visible through river grime, was the faded Redline Freight logo. But the tractor, Dale's red Kenworth, was nowhere in sight. Investigators assumed the current had separated them. But as sonar scans expanded outward, no tractor appeared. It was as if the trailer had been deliberately disconnected before going into the water. When the doors were finally forced open, everyone stepped back. Inside, the temperature-controlled walls had preserved only fragments of what once occupied the trailer. Cardboard packaging warped by water. Rusted shelving. Twisted metal bars. But in the far corner, stuck against the interior wall, divers found something that turned a missing trucker case into a suspected homicide. A torn piece of fabric matching the shirt Dale had been wearing the morning he disappeared. And beneath it, wedged under a metal grate, a boot. Not thrown in. Not floating loose. Pinned there, as though someone had kicked during a struggle. DNA tests would later confirm what the divers already sensed. It was Dale's boot. Size, model, wear pattern. All matching. But there was something stranger. The trailer doors had not failed. The locking mechanism was intact from the outside, meaning Dale hadn't simply driven into the water. Someone had placed the trailer here. Yet the biggest question remained, why drop only the trailer? And where was the tractor? Cameras along Dale's route revealed no sign of him leaving the highway. No sudden turns. No detours. Investigators were baffled until they examined the trailer's underside. The impact pattern wasn't consistent with a high-speed plunge. It matched something else entirely. A vertical drop, as though the trailer had been lowered, slowly, into the water by machinery. Someone had gone to tremendous lengths not to hide the trailer, but to bury it where no tide, current, or casual dive would ever reveal it. But the river had shifted, and the truth was no longer buried. With the trailer recovered, investigators re-examined the final GPS ping from 2013. It had appeared normal at the time, just another point along Route 7B near Swartz. But now technicians realized the signal had a slight anomaly. The coordinates repeated twice before disappearing. That pattern matched one thing: manual jamming. Someone had interrupted the truck's GPS, forcing it to broadcast a false location for a brief moment. Search teams returned to the area, scanning every logging road, hunter's trail, and utility path. Most were too narrow for a semi-truck. But one stood out, an old service road, overgrown and nearly erased by time. 30 years ago, logging companies used it to move heavy machinery. It was wide enough for a tractor-trailer, and it led directly toward the same river bend where the trailer was found. As deputies walked the overgrown road, they found signs they'd missed a decade earlier: disturbed soil, rusted chains, and deep impressions in the earth, long since softened by weather. But the spacing of the tracks matched a heavy-duty forklift, the type capable of lifting a trailer without the tractor attached. That raised the most chilling question of all. Why would anyone hijack a trucker, detach his trailer, move it into the woods, and lower it into a hidden riverbank? Detectives suspected theft at first. But the trailer's cargo, simple dry goods, held no value. Nothing stolen. Nothing tampered with. Dale wasn't carrying anything worth killing for. Unless the cargo wasn't the target. Unless Dale was. A retired Redline driver came forward with a memory he'd kept quiet for years. Weeks before his disappearance, Dale had mentioned a strange encounter on the road. 2 black SUVs following him for miles, switching lanes whenever he did, maintaining perfect distance. He'd laughed it off as coincidence. But the driver remembered Dale's exact words. It felt like they already knew where I was going. Investigators re-examined archived highway footage. And there they found it: 2 dark SUVs in the background of Dale's last confirmed sighting. Following. Never overtaking. Never dropping back. The case shifted again, no longer viewed as a random disappearance but a calculated abduction. But what had they wanted from Dale? Why take him but abandon the trailer? Why hide it for 10 years? As investigators dug further, a private logging contractor stepped forward with a report from 2013, one law enforcement had overlooked. That June, a private helicopter had been spotted flying low along the river before dawn. No flight plan. No registration. No explanation. And its path. Directly over the site where the trailer was found. Someone had used the sky and the woods as cover. Someone with resources. Someone organized. Someone who vanished Dale without leaving a footprint. 2 months after the trailer recovery, sonar teams widening their sweep finally found something wedged beneath a submerged shelf of bedrock, 20 yards downstream. A tractor. Dale's red Kenworth. But unlike the trailer, the tractor told a story the river couldn't hide. The front end was crushed inward, not from water pressure, but from deliberate impact, as though rammed by a heavier vehicle. The driver's side door was bent, the lock sheared cleanly. Inside, investigators found broken plastic from a handheld taser. The passenger seat was torn, with fibers suggesting a struggle. But the most disturbing detail was found lodged behind the dashboard. A bullet. Deformed, but intact enough for ballistics analysis. And lodged in the steering wheel column, blood. Not enough for a fatal wound, but enough to show Dale fought back. Experts pieced together the sequence. 1. Dale was forced off the road near the old service path. 2. The SUVs blocked him in striking the front of his tractor. 3. His door was pried open. 4. A stun device was used.